Okay, this video is for 9.8a, Solving Equations with Fractional Exponents, Part 2. So in the last video, we talked about solving equations with fractional exponents, but all of the fractions had a 1 on top. So when we found the reciprocal, we just had to raise both sides to one number. Now all of our fractional exponents are going to be fractions with numbers other than 1. And so we're going to have to raise both sides to another fraction. So the way to do that is to find the reciprocal of the original fraction exponents. So let's practice finding the reciprocal. In problem number 1, the fraction given to us is 2/3. The reciprocal of that, which also happens to be the number that if you multiply the two fractions together, it'll equal 1, is 3/2. You just flip the fraction upside down. And when you do that, when you multiply the fraction together, so you multiply the top numbers and you multiply the bottom numbers, you end up with 6/6, which equals 1. Alright, let's apply that to some other problems. Now in problem number 5, if we want to solve this problem for x, we need to raise both sides of this equation to the reciprocal of the fraction exponent. Since the fraction exponent is 4/3, we want to raise both sides of the equation to the 3/4 power. In problem number 6, we have it written as a radical. Since it's the 5th root, we just want to raise each side to the 5th power. So that one's not actually a fraction, but just to the 5th power. And that will cancel out the 5th root. Now let's look at some more equations. In these examples it says just determine the first step. So in order for us to solve for x, we need to get the entire x term by itself. For us to get that x term by itself, the first step is going to be subtract 12 from both sides. And that's all we have to do in that problem. In number 12, our goal is to get the x by itself. Everything on the left side is covered by that radical. So we need to get rid of the radical first. Since it's the 4th root, we need to raise both sides of the equation to the 4th power. And that would be our first step, and then we could solve from there. Now let's look at a couple full problems. So we need to solve this, which means we need to get x by itself. So our first step is to get the x term by itself. So we need to get rid of that 3. So let's divide both sides by 3. And when we do that, we get x to the 5/2 on the left, and 96 divided by 3 is 32. And now to get x by itself, we have to raise both sides of the equation to the reciprocal of 5/2, which is 2/5. When we raise the left side of the equation to the 2/5 power, leaves us with just x. These cancel each other out. And then 32 to the 2/5, that's something you should plug into your calculator, is 4. So x equals 4. Let's look at 19. Our first step here is to get rid of our 2/3 exponent, because everything else on the left side of the equation is contained within the parentheses. So we need to open that up, and then we can solve for x. So our first step, raise both sides of the equations to the reciprocal of our exponent. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. When we do that, 2/3 and 3/2 cancel out, and it leaves us just with x minus 5 on the left, and 4 to the 3/2 is 8. And then the last step is to add 5 to both sides, so x equals 13. Alright, let's flip to the back side. We can do a couple more. 22. Now, again, the goal is to solve for x. So to do that, we have to get the x term by itself. So that 7 that's outside the parentheses, we need to get rid of that first. We do that by dividing both sides by 7. Once we divide by 7, we get x plus 9 to the 5/9 on the left side. And negative 7 divided by positive 7 is negative 1. And now we want to raise both sides of this equation again to the reciprocal of our exponent. Reciprocal of 5/9 is 9/5. 9/5. When we do that, 5/9 and 9/5 cancel. Leaves us with x plus 9 on the left and negative 1 to the 9/5 power is still negative 1. And then the last step is subtract 9 from both sides, and x equals negative 10. Alright, let's look at one last problem. Let's go down to number 30. This time the x is on the right side of our equation. And for us to solve for x, like we've been doing, we need to get this x term by itself. So the first thing we need to do is add 12 to both sides. When we add 12 to both sides, negative 148 plus 12 is negative 136. And that's going to equal 17 times x to the 3/5. Now we need to get that x to the 3/5 by itself, so we do that by dividing both sides by 17. And once we've done that, we get negative 8 equals x to the 3/5. And now we need to raise both sides of this equation to the reciprocal of 3/5, which is 5/3. Once we do that, 3/5 and 5/3 cancel out, leaves us with just x on the right, and negative 8 to the 5/3 power is negative 32. And that's our final answer.